All right, good afternoon. My name is Dziura. My United Virtual pilot number is UVA9633. This is a video submission for the requirements of the Flight Review Alpha. Today is January 5th, 2021. I'll be doing this in the PMDG rendition of the 737-800 NGXU with CFM56 engines. The video and the presentation were prepared in accordance with UVA documents, PMDG manuals, and manuals from Boeing FCOMs provided by PMDG. The checklists and procedures, and I'll be using a combination of the two, are an amalgam of Boeing FCOM information and information from United Virtual, generic and type-specific checklists and procedures. Currently, we're parked. Will I get this screen to work? There we go. Currently, we're parked at gate C6 at Washington Dulles International Airport. The weather is clear skies, no winds, altimeter 209 there's no ATC, no traffic. I'll be using the APU for power and air and for startup and so forth. And so we'll jump right in. I'm not going to be doing what Boeing refers to as preliminary safety checks. We are starting cold and dark, but I'm not going to do that. It's very time consuming. All the switches and controls are basically in the correct position anyway when you set up the cold and dark state using the PMDG presets. So I'm going to start with the electrical power up procedure. Okay, so first thing we'll do is we'll go to the overhead, back out just a little bit. So first thing is turn on the battery, make sure the guard is closed. Next, check and make sure that the standby power switch is guarded closed, and it is. Let's go up a little bit here. Check and see that the alternate flap switch, which is here, is guarded closed. And in this case, it's also safety wired in this particular rendition. Move back down a little bit. Make sure that the windshield wipers are in the park position, left and right, down here at the bottom of the screen. Make sure that the electric hydraulic pumps number 1 and 2 are off. Back to the virtual cockpit. Make sure that the landing gear handle is down, and we've got 3 in the green. And then we'll go to the center console. Move up so we can see this section here. The next thing to do is to check and make sure that the engine number 1 APU and engine number 2 fire handles are in, and they are. Let me just check off some items here so I don't miss anything. Also, to make sure that these 2 switches, the overheat detection switches, number 1 and 2, are in the normal position, and they are. We're going to run some fire detection checks. The test switch is located here. One of the test switches, there are actually several. First we're going to do is to switch this to the left position and do the fault in-op test. Okay, so click this to the left, and what we should see is what we're seeing here. That is, the fault light should come on. The APU detection in-up light should come on. Also, up here on the glare shield, the master caution should illuminate, and we should let me run that check again. I should have cleared those. All right, let's try again. Lights come on. Okay, and this is what we should see: the master caution, and then the overheat detection annunciator. Press this to make sure that that's cleared. Come back down here, make sure these lights are still on, and they are, and that's a successful check. The next thing to do is to check the overheat and fire systems. So we're going to click this to the right. The lights in the fire handle should illuminate. We should get an engine number 1 and engine number 2 overheat light, which we did. As you can probably hear, the bell is ringing. Test the fire warning bell cutout. The fire warning switch is illuminated. The bell cutout switch works. And again, we have the master caution and the overheat detection light illuminated. That goes out and back down here. Lights are still on, which they should be. That's a successful test. I'm going to do an extinguisher test. The test switch is located over here. And in this case, what we should see is we're going to test position 1 and 2. All 3 of these lights should come on, left, right, and APU. So that's correct. And that's correct. So that test is complete. All right, having completed those tests, we're now free to start the APU. So we'll go back to the overhead. And we'll bring it down and zoom in a little bit. So the APU panel is basically here. It's this EGT gauge and some annunciator lights. And then the APU control switch is here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the APU. After that, we'll get a low oil pressure light illumination here. The the APU will light off, and the EGT will climb, and of course the APU will spin up. The low oil pressure light will go out, and then eventually the APU will be ready for use. So let's get it started. Notice the EGT gauge displaces slightly. There's a light off. And then the APU is spinning up, and this light should go out, and it does. And then after the temperature peaks and comes back down, what we'll see is we'll see the APU generator off bus light illuminate, which tells us that the APU is ready for use and the APU generators can be engaged, and that'll be the next step. Okay. Engage both generators. And the APU is running. Now, if we let the APU run for too long, what happens is you end up with a fuel imbalance. And so to correct that, I'm going to turn on the left forward wing fuel pump. Alright, now we're required to do another fire check, this time for the wheel well, so we'll go back to the center pedestal. Let's see here. Okay, so we're going to switch the test switch to the right position again. This time what we see is the overheat detection lights, the lights on the handle, and the wheel well light, the wheel well detector light. Up here, same kind of thing, bell cutout, overheat detection annunciation, cleared by the master caution switch, and these lights remain on. So that test is successful. Okay, back to the overhead for the next step. Way up here, well, power up the internal reference systems on DC, and then the align lights come on and they'll flash when this thing is aligned. It's on fast align, so that'll happen pretty quick. Alright, coming down, the next thing to do is to turn on the packs, set them to auto, the left and right. Come down a little further, make sure that the isolation valve is open, which it is, and then make sure all three of these switches are on. That is the left bleed air, the right bleed air, and the APU bleed. All of those switches need to be in the on position, and they are. Okay, now that we've got power on the aircraft and the inertial reference systems are aligning, that basically completes that procedure. But we'll do three other things which are not on this procedure, but are part of what we need to do. So I'm going to put up on the screen this PDF, which is a printout of a session I did with the UVA flight planner for this flight. So I set it up for a flight to and from Dulles, 2 hours in length, with the 737-800. And these are the results that I got. So I'm going to use the fuel figure here for today. The other numbers are pretty close, but not quite. That is the takeoff V speeds and the landing V speed and so forth are all pretty close to what we'll actually use, but not quite. I'll take the values that are generated by the PMDG FMC, but just so you know, it's here, and like I say, I will be using this fuel amount. And I think I also am using the maximum landing gross weight as a gauge as well. Okay. So the next thing we'll do, let's go to the virtual cockpit. Bring this up here. I just want to check my video and make sure I'm not blocking any view here so you can see what's going on. Nope, we're okay. Okay, we'll clear this message and clear that. Go to the flight sim menu and to fuel. And I said the amount of fuel is supposed to be 15,825 pounds. So we'll start with that and clear this. We'll go to payload. Minimum payload required is 50%, so that's what I'll use. And that's set. Okay, and so that completes that part of the checklist, the power-up checklist, plus the additional items. So the next thing we're going to do is what's called the preliminary pre-flight procedure. Okay, and the first thing on that, first item on that is to check various quantities. We'll go up to the overhead panel first. And take note of the fact that the crew oxygen gauge reads 1,600 pounds per square inch, which is acceptable. We'll go back to the virtual cockpit. I'll pop this up. Look here in the lower right hand corner, you'll see that the left engine is showing 94% oil quantity, and the right engine is 99. Okay, and select this, and we'll note that the hydraulic fluid quantities are 98% on the right and 80% on the left. Those are PMDG values. I have no idea why they're so different, not a clue. But they are within an acceptable range. Okay, back to the overhead. So we're already basically in the right vicinity to continue. There's a warning light here called PSEU, the proximity switch electrical unit. It's supposed to be out, and it is. There's also another warning light here labeled GPS, and it's supposed to be out, and it is. We note that the service interphone switch is off. That's where it's supposed to be. And let me move up a little bit. Coming over here to the engine panel, what we're looking for here is we're looking for these four annunciator lights, the reverser lights, and the engine control lights to be out. And the electronic engine control systems are supposed to be on, which is evidenced by the fact that there's no lights in the switches. So they are on. Oh, yeah, one other thing, I almost forgot that. Let's see here. Right, so the other thing we want to do is make sure that this switch for the passenger oxygen is guarded closed, and make sure that the passenger oxygen on light is out, and it is. There are three secondary landing gear indicator lights up here just below the oxygen panel, and they should be showing 3 in the green, which they are. Check up here to see that the flight recorder switch is guarded closed. And then we're going to go back to the center pedestal. Just aft of the center pedestal is an access door for manual gear extension, and what we're looking for here is to make sure that this door is closed, and it is. And then the last thing on the preliminary pre-flight procedure, which we can see from this view, is to make sure that the parking brake is off. And I didn't point this out earlier, but we have the wheels chalked. Okay, that completes the preliminary pre-flight procedure. Next item is the CDU pre-flight. Okay. All right, so click menu, FMC, and we're on the ident page, which is the first page we need to look at. What we're looking for here is to make sure that we're flying the airplane we think we're flying, the 737-800 split scimitar wing with an engine thrust rating of 26,000 pounds. Make sure that the navigation database is up to date, and it is, and that's all we need to worry about on the ident page. Go to position initiate. We need to set the IRS position, and we'll use GPS to do that. So if we get down to here, we can capture the GPS location and then enter it here. And the displays come alive. I'll put Dulles as our reference airport. No point in putting the gate in because it's not available from the database anyway, so you just get an error message. Go to the route page. Our origin, of course, is Washington Dulles, as is our destination. We'll use as a flight number UAL9633. Doesn't really matter for this flight, but I'll put it in there anyway. And then for the route, I'm going to put 1 point in for the route, so I'll go to the route page number 2. It's helpful to have a reference point, which is located about 10 miles south of runway 19 left center line, facilitate the use of LNAV, which we'll use for the very first portion of the flight. We won't be using it for the entire flight, but just for the very first portion. All right, so before I continue on here, I'm going to put in the departure and a runway and the arrival. So we're going to be taking off from runway 19 left, and we're going to arrive and do an ILS 19 left, and I'll put in the DATI transition also. Click route, activate, execute. Take a look at the legs page, and there's a discontinuity there, but it's irrelevant for this flight, as you'll see. There's the first page, and then the second page, of course, you see information. We're going to be landing on 19 left, and then after that there's the missed approach procedure. Okay. So the next thing to do is to go to the performance initiation page. I use the shortcut to put in the zero fuel weight, 5,000 pounds for reserves, cost index of 50, which is what's recommended by UVA, cruise altitude of 6,000, and that's all the information we need here. For takeoff, we're going to use a full power takeoff, so I'm not going to do any kind of derate. It'll be a full thrust takeoff, full thrust available. Oh, and what I should note here is that we should be expecting to see 98.1% N1 for takeoff. Okay, it's going to be a flaps 5 takeoff. I'll use the CG shortcut to put that in, and then we'll enter the V speeds, and that will make them appear on the primary flight display. And we'll also take note of these. I've already got these written down. So V1 is 129, V rotate is 131, and V2 is 142. One more thing we need to do, default on this, and I'll go to the second, page 2 of takeoff ref. Default is for the acceleration height is 1500 AGL. I'm going to change that to 1000. Okay. Go back to this page. So that takes care of the CDU pre-flight. I'll put this back to legs and drop it down here. I'll bring up the right CDU, go to FMC, init ref, and takeoff ref. So this way we've got the legs page on the left CDU and the takeoff ref information on the right CDU for later. Okay, that completes the CDU pre-flight procedure. Now we're on to the pre-flight procedure. And this is largely a Boeing procedure. Back to the overhead panel. Okay, so here we're looking to see that the flight control switches are guarded closed. The flight spoiler switches A and B are guarded closed. We'll turn on the yaw damper and make sure the light goes out, which it does. Check those off. We're moving downward on the left side. And we'll look at the nav panel. And what we're looking for here is for these selector switches, VHF nav and IRS, to both be in the normal position. On the displays panel, the source should be source selector should be auto, and the control panel should be in the normal position, and they are. Okay. Continuing down to the fuel panel, I'll look over here at my cheat sheet. Okay, several things to look for. Basically looking for certain enunciators on and off and switch positions, of course. So the first thing we want to note is that these four lights are illuminated. Engine valve closed, the two engine valve closed lights and the spar valve closed lights. They should both be on, and they are. Let's see. The next thing to look for is to make sure that this light, the filter bypass light, is out, and it is. Then check to see that the cross feed valve selector is closed, and it is. Verify that the valve open light, which is right here, is extinguished. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, there's two filter bypass lights. They should both be out. And then the fuel pump switches themselves, and they should all be off except for the left forward, which I'm using for the APU. That takes care of the fuel panel. Next is the electrical panel. That's what the APU is doing. Okay. So, a little bit of redundancy here. We're looking to make sure that the battery switch is guarded closed. The cabin utility power switch is on. The IFE passenger seat power switch is on. The standby power switch is guarded closed. Checking to see that all of these lights up here are out. Battery discharge, TR unit, and electrical lights. And also that the standby power off switch is, or excuse me, the light which is located here is off. And then we want to make sure that the generator disconnect switches are guarded closed. They also happen to be safety wired. The drive lights are supposed to be illuminated, and they are. Coming down a little further, bus transfer switch is supposed to be guarded closed, and it is. The bus transfer lights here and here are off. The source lights are here and here are off. And the generator off bus lights are on, and that's correct. Okay, in the Boeing procedure you go through the fire detection and warning checks again, and I'm not going to repeat those. It basically assumes that the APU hasn't been started yet, which is a little odd. Okay, moving over here to the center, we want to make sure that the equipment cooling switches are in the norm position, the supply and exhaust. Verify that the off lights are out, which they are. Close the guard on the emergency light switch, which arms the emergency light system, and of course the light should go out, and it did. We don't have any passengers today, but I'll put the seat belt sign in auto. Verify yet again that the windshield wipers are parked here, and they are. Moving up to the next column of panels, we want to turn on the window heat. We'll leave the probe heat off for now. We don't clear skies, no visible moisture, and so forth, so there won't be any wing or engine anti-ice required, so these switches are off. Once again, verify that the electric hydraulic switches are off, and also verify that the engine hydraulic switches are on, which they are. Take a look up here to the right at the air conditioning panel. Couple of things to notice here. Not really sure where this switch is supposed to be normally. I haven't been able to find that, but I'm going to assume that given where it is correct. This the air temperature source selector switch. The trim air switch should be on. There are 3 zone temperature warning lights right here. They should be out, and they are. The recirculation fan switches left and right should be in the auto position, and they are. And then we're looking at the bleed stuff again, verifying that the packs are either in auto or high, which they are. They're in auto. The isolation valve is open, which it is. And then all three bleed switches are on, left, right, and APU. Okay, so we're going to come down to the light panel. Landing lights are off, runway lights are off, taxi light is off. Logo light is off, position lights are on and steady, collision light is off, and the wing and wheel lights are off. And then verify on the ignition panel that the ignition rotary switches are in the off position, left and right, and they are. And this electric switch can be wherever you want. All right. Next up is the mode control panel. So first I'm going to take this little pop-up and position it for later use. I'm not going to use it right now, but I will be using it later. Close it for now. Okay, so basically just going left to right. First I'll point out that V2 is 142 knots. I like to have V2 plus 10 in the speed window. So I'll put 152 in. The runway heading, I think is 191 or 192. 192, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Runway heading is 192, and that's what I'll put in the heading window. We're going to be climbing to 6,000 and flying the pattern at 6,000. So I'll put that in the altitude window. We'll leave the course windows alone for now. I'll take care of those later on. Turn on the left flight director, then the right. And then we'll leave the auto throttle off until we get to the hold short in accordance with UVA rules. And then I'll arm the VNAV and the LNAV, which we'll use for takeoff. And help give us flight director information. Okay. All right. Then we'll take a look at the left side EFIS panel right here. So the minimums reference selector should be either in radio or baro. It's in baro, and I'll leave it there. That's what we're going to use. We don't need to worry about the flight path vector switch or the meter switch. The barometric reference should be in inches HG, and it is. The altimeter was set when we loaded the aircraft 29902. It's a standard day. VOR ADF switches. I'm not going to use the left one on the display, but I will use number 2, so I'll leave this in the VOR position, the right selector. We're in map mode. Don't need to use the center switch, don't need that. We're not going to be using, there's not going to be any traffic, and there should be no weather to be concerned about, so we won't use the weather radar. That completes the EFIS. Okay. Oh, don't need to do that. Okay, so come over here. We're not going to be using the electronic flight bags today, so I'll turn this off so it's not distracting. Go down here and check the pilot's, the left side oxygen supply, looking for the yellow cross. That looks good. Cross over to the right side, do the same thing. Then back to the virtual cockpit, left side. Okay. Next thing to do is make sure our clock is running. Right there. And then we'll take a look at the display select panel, which is located here. Both of these switches should be in the normal position, and they are. Okay, there are some display light tests we can do for these three annunciators. So for test number 1 is you should see amber, amber, amber. That's what Boeing calls it. I call it yellow, yellow, yellow. And then test position 2, you should see red, red, amber. And that's what we've got. Okay, now we want to take a look at the flight instruments. So stuff in here. Okay, so the only flags that should be showing are basically the TGAS off and or no V-speeds. We've already got V-speeds loaded in, so that one's not there. These here. Also, what we should see up here is the auto throttle mode is blank, and it is. I've already armed LNAV and VNAV, so we've got that for lateral and pitch. And of course we should see flight director because we turned on the flight director switches. And the status. That completes the flight instrument portion of it. We're going to come over here to the ground proximity panel. There's a whole set of tests you can do. I'm going to skip that. It's rather lengthy. Lots of things happen, lights flash and so forth. Simply note that the inhibit switches, flap, ground, and terrain are all guarded closed. We'll leave it at that. Check and see that the landing gear handle is down, and we've got 3 in the green for the landing gear position indicators. Take this opportunity to put the anti-skid into RTO, and the light should go out, and it does. Okay, I'll swing back over here. Can't quite see it, but I'll fix that. Okay, so this is the engine display panel control panel, and so what we want to see here is the N1 set and the speed ref set to auto, and is there anything else? Oh yes, one other thing. So the other thing is to reset this and then leave it in the right position, and of course that takes care of that. Okay. Then we want to look at the engine instrument display and see if there's anything out of the ordinary that shouldn't be there, and there's not. There's an appropriate fuel quantity registration, oil quantity. We expect these lights to be on because the engines are not running. So that looks normal. We'll go back to the center pedestal. So I'll do this partially, but it's not quite modeled correctly in the PMDG. That is this cargo fire test. Can't quite do it the way it's written. That's okay. We'll do what we can. So here's the test switch. We expect to see some lights illuminate. And here the Claxton. And so we've got the extinguisher lights and the forward and aft lights and the discharge light. And you can come over here and do this, but I can't let go of this button. I do that. I can do that. And the lights are still on. Oh, actually it worked better than I thought. Okay, good. Didn't think that was working, so that's a correct test. Alright, now we're going to tune some frequencies. We're not going to be talking to anybody, except myself, of course, and you. But I'll put the CTAF frequency in the COM1 active. Now, I'll do this while I'm thinking about it, and that's to move this up out of the way, because later on, if that's there, it obscures the view of the NAV1 radio. So what I'm going to do is pre-select some frequencies. I'm going to put a frequency that I'm not going to use in the left nav, so that it doesn't give me any distracting information on the navigational display. So this frequency doesn't produce anything. In the standby window, I'll put in the ILS frequency for runway 19 left, which is 110.1. So we'll put that in standby. And then over here I'm going to do the same thing. Oh, excuse me, I'm not going to do the same thing. I'm going to put in the active window the RML VOR DME frequency, which is 113.5, because we're going to use that to navigate around the circuit, excuse me. And then again I'll put in the 110.1 in the standby window. Okay, and that'll set us up for using those later. Volume and audio are where we need them to be. I'll put 2200 in the ATC in the for the transponder squawk, even though that's not really relevant to this flight. Reset that view. Okay, so that takes care of the radios, VHF, nav, that. We're not using ADF today. We're not using weather radar. And I put a value in the transponder. All right, back in the left seat again, checking to see that the nose wheel steering switch is guarded closed, mode switch. The next thing to do, and we'll just come over here and back out a little bit so you can sort of see everything, is to check and make sure that the speed brake handle is down. The reverse thrust levers are in the down position, which they are. The forward thrust levers are closed, which they are. You can see that. They're up against the stop. The flaps are in the up position. That is the flap handle. And now we'll set the parking brake. And I will remove the chocks so I don't forget to do that later. Otherwise, GSX will be unhappy with me when it comes time for pushback. Okay. Next thing is to check that the engine start levers are in the cutoff position, and I'll zoom in here. These are the levers, and they are both in the cutoff position. Let me mark some of this off. We also want to make sure that the stab trim override switches are in the normal position, up and guarded actually. And then finally, for this checklist, I'll do the departure brief. I'm not going to put it up on the screen, I'll just read it. Hopefully you can hear me okay, I believe you can. Okay, kind of long, but I'll get through it. Okay, so we're flying a Boeing 737-800 SSW. It's got CFM56 engines. The nose number is 0297. The max takeoff weight is 174,400. The fuel, which we started with initially, was 15,825, which gives us a gross weight of 131,400 pounds. The max landing gross weight is 144,000 pounds, so we're not going to have any problems with that. We're already below that before we even left the gate. No dispatch release or dispatch number applicable for this flight. No maintenance discrepancies. Weather, ATIS, clear skies, visibility unlimited, no winds, no wind shear, and the altimeter is 290 or 2. No NOTAMs affecting the taxi out or departure or the arrival. There's no ATC for the flight. For taxi, we're going to push back facing east. We're going to taxi the runway 19 left via taxiways Echo, Kilo, and Juliet 1. And Dulles doesn't have any designated hotspots. We're going to be using runway 19 left. It'll be a full power takeoff, and we'll use full runway length of 11,500 feet. Rejected takeoff criteria. Prior to 80 knots on the takeoff roll, I'll reject the takeoff for the following: activation of the master caution system or a system failure, unusual noise or vibration, tire failure, abnormally slow acceleration, takeoff configuration warning, fire or fire warning, engine failure, predictive, well, there's not going to be any wind shear, but if there were predictive wind shear warning, if one of the side windows opens, that would be colorful, if the airplane is unsafe or unable to fly. Above 80 knots, but prior to V1, I'll reject for the following: fire or fire warning, engine failure, if the airplane is unsafe or unable to fly. Otherwise, we're going flying. Takeoff flap settings and V speeds, we'll be using a flaps 5 for takeoff. V1 is 129, V rotate is 131, V2 is 142, and the bleeds will be on. This will be a bleed on takeoff. There's no special profile considerations. Our acceleration height is 1,000 AFE, which is 1,313 MSL. The field elevation here is 313 feet. No ATC required for the clearance required for the flight. There's no SID and there are no routing restrictions. And we're going to be flying a circuit pattern using the RML VOR DME as a navigational reference. We'll climb to 6,000 and we'll stay there until it's time to descend for the ILS approach. There's no transition altitude is not applicable. We'll be up 122.8 in COM 1. Squawk 2200. There are no significant terrain or obstacle considerations. Engine failure procedure. So the idea here is if you lose an engine, but it's safe to do so, you can keep the engine running for 3 minutes and then shut it down. You want to make sure that the auto throttle or shut it down if flight conditions allow. Make sure that the auto throttle is disengaged. Make sure the thrust lever on the affected engine is closed. If you're shutting it down, of course. Make sure that again, if you're shutting it down, make sure the engine start lever on the affected engine is confirmed in the cutoff position. Turn off the pack switch on the affected side. Start the APU if needed. Balance fuel is needed. Transponder mode to TA only. We don't have to worry about NAs for today. And plan to land at the nearest suitable airport, which would be Dulles. That completes the departure brief. Okay, first checklist, and I'm using Boeing checklists. I'm not gonna. Well, I'll do this. Just so you can see where it comes from. It looks like this. This comes out of the Quick Reference Handbook. So I'll just read through this. We've checked that the oxygen it's all set. The nav transfer and display switches are normal or auto, as the case may be. The window heat is on. The pressurization mode selector is an auto. I don't think I actually did that. I know it is, but let's check that. Yeah, it's right here, and it is in the auto position. Flight instruments, we've checked all those. We put in the heading and altimeter. Parking brake is set, and the engine start levers are in cutoff. That completes the takeoff. The pre-flight pre-flight procedure checklist. All right. All right. Next, we're going to do the before start procedure. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the virtual cockpit. First thing on the procedure is to make sure the cockpit door is closed and locked. It's closed. I don't know if it's locked. No way to know that in this particular simulator. We've set up the CDUs, as I mentioned earlier, for display. Legs on the left, takeoff ref on the right. Take a look at the engine display and make sure that the takeoff bugs are set for the expected N1, which they are, 98.1. Take another quick look at the mode control panel. Again, the auto throttle is off, otherwise everything is set up. So we have speed, heading, altitude, and we've armed VNAV and LNAV. Oh, and the flight director switches are both on. Okay. We never had any doors open, but just so you know, this is the annunciator panel, which tells you you've got a door open and all the lights are out, so the doors are closed. Check and make sure that the flight deck windows are closed and locked. There's the one on the left, or on the right, and there's the one on the left, both closed and locked. We don't need any start pushback clearance. Okay. Going to the overhead panel. Okay. Alright, so there's no fuel in the center tank, so I'll leave those fuel pumps off. I will turn on the remaining 3 wing fuel tanks. Turn on the electric hydraulic pumps. Turn on the anti-collision light, which is down here. Go back to the virtual cockpit. I'm going to set the elevator trim, which is supposed to be 5.6, excuse me, 5.16. Oops, too far. 5.16. That's set. Make sure the parking brake is set, which it is. You can see it here. And we've pulled the chocks. Okay, I'll run through the before start checklist from Boeing. Alright, so flight deck door is closed. The fuel pumps are on, and we've got 15,700 pounds of fuel right here. Passenger signs are as required. The windows are locked. We've set up the MCP. I've got V2 plus 10 in speed, runway heading and heading, and 6,000 feet in altitude. We've got our V speeds 129, 131, and 142 respectively. We've completed the CDU pre-flight. Let's see. We've done the departure brief, and the anti-collision light is on. That completes that checklist. All right. So the next thing to do is push back and start. I'm going to take a quick break before we start because I can't leave the cockpit after this. And this is going to take a little while, so I will leave you with this view. Clock is there, you can watch it run. I'm not going to stop the simulator or the recording, and I'll be right back. Check and make sure the recording is still going. And it is. That looks good. Okay. Let's see. Alright, so what we're going to do bring up this display. Yep, that'll work. Let me move this up here for now. And get it out of the way a little bit. Let me check something. Yeah, I guess we'll get it out of the way for a moment. Okay, we're going to start the pushback and engine start. I'll use GSX for the pushback. Sorry about that. Okay. And as you can see, magically, the tractor appears with the United logo on it. Now, while that's happening, I'm going to go up here, turn the pack switches off.
Hello, Captain. We're ready for pushback. Locking gear.
Okay, so we want to go tail left.
Departure check completed. Bypass bin inserted. Release parking brake.
Parking brake is off.
Push. All engines clear. Start at will.
Okay, so we'll start the left engine first. Go to ground. And what we're looking for here is, we're looking for N1 to rise, which it is. I don't know if you can see that, but we're also looking for N2 to reach about 25%, and then we'll add fuel. There we go. Now we're looking for fuel flow. And then, of course, the engines to light off. And we have fuel flow. And zoom in a little bit here. See that the EGT over here on the left is rising. Should be able to hear the switch click, which I did. I don't know if you could hear it or not, but I can. We'll start engine number 2. And again, we're looking for 25% N2. Also looking for the oil pressure to come up. That would be a good thing.
Set parking brakes.
Waiting your confirmation for good engine start.
Okay. Add fuel to the right engine. I'm going to tell GSX that we've got a good engine start, even though we haven't confirmed that yet, just to save a little time so that they will get out of our way. That down. And EGT is rising.
Unlocking gear. Tow truck disconnected. Bypass bin removed.
Okay, we've got 2 good engines. We'll now move on to the before taxi procedure. Back to the overhead. Okay. So the first thing to do is engage the engine generators.
Ride is clear.
Time for the probe heat. We don't need any anti-ice today. Left and right pack to auto. Isolation valve to auto. APU bleed off. And we're done with the APU. We're now on our own electrical power and engine air. So we'll secure the APU. Back to the virtual cockpit. We're going to set flaps 5. 1, 2, 5. And of course we'll check that once the flaps are fully deployed. Flight controls. Take a peek outside. Going to disable the parking brake momentarily. Rudders feel good. Got a good movement there. Spoilers and ailerons appear to be working. And the elevator works. Yeah, we've got flaps 5 on the indicator, and the flaps indicator light is green. Reset the parking brake momentarily. Blank out this lower display. Put the transponder to transponder. Check the recall. And turn on the taxi lights. And then do the before taxi checklist. Okay, so the generators are on, the probe heat's on, no anti-ice required, the packs are in auto, the isolation valve is auto, APU bleed is off, and the APU is off. The engine start switches are to be in the continuous position. Didn't have that on the procedure. We'll have to correct that. Let's see. The engine start levers are in the idle detent. Ground equipment is clear. We've set the flaps at flaps 5. And the leading edge flaps extension light is green. Right there. We check the flight controls. Blank the lower display, transponders and transponder. Check the recall. We're not using the electronic flight bag. And that completes the before taxi checklist. Oh, yes, and the auto brakes are an RTO. Forgot that one. There we go. Okay, the next procedure we'll do once we get to the runway is the before takeoff procedure. For now, we'll taxi. Okay, so I'm going to taxi straight ahead to the T intersection and turn left, north, and that'll put us on Kilo. Throttle quadrant doesn't work very well. Neither does my yoke, so I have to fiddle with it to get it control the speed correctly. We'll see how we do today. Okay, we're crossing Juliet. We're going to turn left on Kilo. Almost at the turn. Going to Juliet 1. We are approaching runway 19 left, just as we said we would. We verify that. And now to use a little bit of brakes to get us to stop. With our parking brake on, just for keep us steady here. Okay. So, we'll now engage the auto throttle. Go up to the overhead lower panel I'll turn on the landing lights. Turn off the taxi light. Position to strobe and steady. We won't use the wing lights. It's broad daylight. Don't need to do that. Oh, one thing I did overlook. I missed this before too. I'm glad I took a look up here. Didn't set our cruise altitude correctly. Or our landing altitude. And we'll just take a look around at everything else. Everything else looks pretty good. Okay, so down here. That takes care of the TCAS. Look at the before takeoff checklist, which is just the flaps and the stabilizer trim. So we've got the flaps are set at 5, and the leading edge flaps light is green. We've got 15,200 pounds of fuel. We're going to be doing a full-length takeoff on runway 19 left. And we'll check the runway heading once we get on the runway and so forth. So pop this up. This is going to be with us for most of the flight. Okay. All right. We'll taxi onto the runway. Take a look this way, make sure there's nothing coming. Runway looks clear down that way. Pretty good lineup. Okay. We're going to apply about 45% N1. Then I'll select the Toga hotspot, which is located over here below the course wheel on the left. We'll go flying. So, column, a little forward pressure on the column. Probably about 45%. Looking for the N1 to rise, and it is. Looks good. Toga. Oh, and I'll pop this up also. Maintain the runway center line, 80 knots, relax back pressure or forward pressure.
V1, rotate.
Time to rotate.
V2.
Up a little, hesitate. Then on up again. Positive rate, gear up. Hold the nose up, not too high. Looking for 1,000 feet AGL. There it is. Lower the nose and accelerate. Flaps up. Autopilot on. gear are up and locked and off. Auto brake is off. Accelerating at 250 knots, climbing to 6,000 feet. The engine bleeds are on, packs are auto, landing gear is up and off, flaps are up, no lights. Reset the ignition switches. Turn on position information on the nav display. Thousand feet to go. Click off VNav. Speed is selected, 250 knots. Select heading select. And as soon as we get to 6,000 feet, we'll turn to a heading of 280. Right about there. Okay, so we are crossing the AML 181 radial. The next navigation event will be once we reach the 235 radial. We'll turn to a heading of 010. I'll take this opportunity to take a look at the approach plate. I'll do a full arrival briefing later. I'll take a look at this now. Okay, so we're going to do an ILS runway 19 left at Dulles. The course is 191 degrees, the ILS course. Frequency is 110.1. Identifier is India Sierra Golf Charlie. Decision altitude is 502 feet. And of course we have the required weather, no problem. It's an interesting approach. We're going to Dady first, so there's a little bit of a stair step downward. That has consequences. I'll explain those later. Crossing the 202 radial, looking for the 235. I'll put the courses in now. Of course, we'll still need to select the frequency. 737 FMC doesn't do that for us automatically. Okay. Crossing the 222 radial. Moon's up. Okay, there's the 234. We'll come right to 010. The next navigational event will be when we are abeam Dulles, which is over here in the lower right corner. Next flight event is to slow to 210 knots. After that, things will pick up. Rolling out on a heading of 010. Crossing the 249 radial. I can see that. Nope. Need 40-mile range to see that. Take this. No, I'll explain that later. The next procedure we'll be doing, of course, will be the descent procedure. Once we'll start working on that once we pass the abeam point I mentioned a moment ago. Almost there, not quite. Pretty close. Slowing to 210. We don't need any flaps yet. We will once we slow to 180 later on, but not now. And we are decelerating. Okay. So I'm going to start the return procedure party rolling with the we've already looked at the approach procedure. I won't go over that again. Choose our flaps setting for landing. I'm going to do a flaps 30 approach. That will give us our V speed, which will give us a V ref of 140 knots and a V target, since there's a no wind day, of 145. Okay, I'll do the approach briefing. Transition level is not applicable. Weather is the same as it was a few minutes ago. Clear skies, no visibility, unlimited, no wind. 29 or 902. We expect a dry runway. We don't have a star, and there are no routing restrictions. No NOTAMs. We're going to land on runway 19 left using an ILS approach. Decision altitude is 502 feet. Height above touchdown 200. The go-around procedure will be to select toga, verify go-around on the TMA. The autopilot will be off, so we'll rotate by hand to 15 degrees, set the flaps to 15. With a positive rate of climb, raise the gear. We will already pre-selected the missed approach. Check to make sure that we've set the correct missed approach altitude, which is 3,000 feet. At 400 feet, select heading select or LNAV as the case may be. Autopilot at 1,500 feet. Once we get to altitude, set our speed. cleanup is necessary, and then proceed to the missed approach point. For landing, we're going to use flaps 30 with a VREF of 140 and a V target of 145. The auto brake level selection will be level 3. There are no terrain considerations. There's no traffic. After we land, we'll exit to the right. We're going to taxi to gate C6, our departure gate, via Juliet and Echo. That completes the approach briefing. So we're going to turn when we get to 340 radial. We're crossing the 317 now. So I said I got our VREF. I got the approach briefing done. Put 502 in here. I don't know if you can hear the dog barking, but it's pretty loud. 502 in the barrel with the MINS. I'll get the nav. I'm going to delay the nav radio until later because I'm setting up the ILS radio frequency because we're still using the VOR. I've already got the approach course set on both sides, 191. Set the auto brake level to 3. And that completes the descent procedure. Checklist. Pressurization. I set the landing altitude earlier. Oh, we didn't do this. Check the recall. Auto brake is set. We got the landing data for VREF and minimums. And I've completed the approach briefing. And it looks like I set the wrong speed. We're supposed to be at 210. So we'll fix that now. It's okay, we got plenty of time. But I am supposed to be at 210. Looking for the 340, crossing the 331. When we get to the 340 radial, we're going to come right to a heading of 100. We're going to decrease our speed to 180. Set flaps 1 and decrease speed to 180, and then we'll descend to 3,000 feet. Almost there. Takes longer to cross radials go in this direction. Okay, coming right to 100. Flaps 1. Speed 180. Slowing down. Select 3,000 feet. And And we'll use level change to get us there. Okay, as far as the approach procedure is concerned, all we have to do is make sure, at this point, is make sure the landing lights are on. Of course, I never turned them off because we never got above 10,000 feet. I'll verify that, and they are in the on position. We're looking to cross the 355 radial, at which point we'll turn right to a heading of 140. As far as the approach checklist is concerned, all we have to do is just check the altimeters, which are 29 or 902. We are descending, crossing the 349 radial. And we should be down to 3,000 feet without any problem. In good order. Okay, so once we're on that heading of 140, we're supposed to select approach. Well, I've got to get the frequencies up first, but we're supposed to set approach on the mode control panel. But I'm not going to do that right away, and I'll explain here in a moment why not. Okay, there's the 354. Heading 140. Whoops, that's speed, not heading. That's never happened before, I promise. You believe me, don't you? Okay, coming around at 140. We no longer need the VOR. We'll enable our nav frequencies, and we'll look for the identifier. So I said a moment ago, once we start picking up the localizer, I'm not gonna go directly to approach, and the reason is because if you do it from here, which is what's recommended, you don't get an ILS approach in the FMC. You get a localizer glide path approach, which of course is not an ILS approach, and I'm not really sure why that is. It could be because I go through Dady, and there's a little bit of a stair-step descent till we get to the final approach fix altitude. Not really sure why. But if I hold off on going to approach mode until we've got a glide path active, I do get an ILS approach. So if you want to give me any feedback on why that's the case, I would appreciate it, because I know it's not in accordance with the instructions for the FRA. Okay. So there's the identifier, ISGC. We'll get rid of that noise. Of course, it's available here in the FMC. We now have a localizer diamond appearing here on the PFD, 27 DME. I'll take another 10-degree cut towards Dady. We're watching for the localizer to become active, and then I will select localizer. Flap settings I'm going to use today, I'm going to use flaps 1, which is where we are now, flaps 5, 15, and 30. This approach altitude, by the way, is 3,000 feet, and you're supposed to climb straight ahead to 800 feet, then climbing left turn to 3,000 feet along a heading of 010. And let me check something real quick. That's right. Okay. Here comes the localizer. We'll select VOR localizer. It's armed. Solid diamond. We have localizer capture. And like I say, I'm going to hold off on arming approach mode until we've got the glide path, glide slope indication coming down. If I do it too soon, I won't get an ILS approach. Alright, I'm going to continue on as we are for the moment. I'm going to arm the speed brake now. I have our reference speed displayed over here on the speed tape. When we get to about 15, 16 miles, I'm going to lower the gear. Select the speed of VREF plus 20, which is 160 knots right here, and go to flaps 5. And then in short order, we'll go to flaps 15 and slow down a little bit more, and then finally flaps 30 and 145. .7 DME. Slightly left of glide, slightly left of course. And correcting. Airport's is becoming visible now in the scenery, just barely. And as I said, the missed approach altitude is 3,000 feet. We're not going to have to change that, so it's already set. So we're good to go there. .8. Okay, landing gear. Speed 160. Flaps 15. Excuse me, flaps 5. Sorry about that. And very shortly we'll go to flaps 15. Solid diamond. I'll select approach. I'll arm the approach mode now. Glide slope is armed. Go to flaps 15. Flaps 15. And we'll slow to about 153. Glide slope is active. Glide slope capture. Set the other autopilot. Flaps 30. Set our speed to 145. V target. Okay. Don't need that anymore. We're on the way down. Check to make sure that my simulator throttle position matches the aircraft throttle position. Thank you, PMDG, for providing that little helpful thing. So I said earlier that the flight controls that I have don't really work all that well. So we'll see how the landing goes. We're at 8 DME. I'll disable the autopilot and the auto throttle. Oh, between, say, around 450 AGL before we get to the decision altitude. I have a clear view of the runway now, so that's not going to be a problem. We are on course. We are on glide path. Speed is 145. Flaps are 30, and light is green. Landing gear is down, and 3 in the green. There's the outer marker. Land 3. Going to set the ignitions to continuous. Landing checklist, the engine start switch are continuous, the speed brake is armed. Landing gear are down, the flaps are down, and we got a green light. That completes the landing checklist. Feet on the pedals. We're not going to be doing automatic landing, obviously. .700 AGL, 4 DME, good stabilized approach.
Approaching minimums. Minimums.
Landing.
100. 50. 30. 20. 10.
Roll back. Thrust reversed. Not a great landing. And we have thrust reversed. But with my flight controls, not bad. So we can slow down for this turn off. I don't know if we're going to make this or not. I think we can make it. Auto brakes off. A little throttle to get off. Speed brake up. Flaps coming all the way up. Okay. After landing procedure, the speed brakes are down, flaps are coming up. I have to go to the overhead. Probe heat off. Landing lights off. Taxi light on. Start the APU. And there's no ground radar here, I don't believe. I couldn't find any reference to that. But just to be on the safe side. I'll leave the transponder on. Okay, we'll start our taxi. Should have done that. So we're taxiing to gate C6. So first taxiway to the left we'll come to is Foxtrot, which is not correct. The second one is Echo, which is where C6 is located along taxiway Echo. There should be Foxtrot coming up. And it is. Okay, now we gotta find Charlie 6, which is unfortunately not an easy thing to do with this scenery, but we'll figure it out. There are no turn-in lines. I'm not really sure why. I wish they would fix that. But this is where we need to turn. There it is. Magically, Charlie 6 dead ahead. Coming in a little hot. Now a little cold. We are. Park and brake. Well, sometimes the simulator doesn't like to set the park and brake. Let's see if we can do that. We can. Nope. Nope. Alright. I'll play your game. There. That fixes that. Yep, sometimes the parking brake just will not set. Okay. Okay, so the chocks are set, even though I can't get the parking brake set, but the chocks are set. Turn on the APU generators. Shut the engines down. Oh, one thing I wanted to do over here but didn't do was to turn the flight director off. Okay, that's good. Turn these off. Turn that off. Turn that off. Go to steady on this. Open the isolation valve. Turn on the APU bleed. Turn these off. Turn off the seatbelt signs. Fuel pumps. Electric hydraulic. Probe heat's off. We'll turn off the window heat. Turn off the yaw damper. Let's see. Fuel pumps, probe heat, hydraulic panels, flaps. So let's make sure. Yep, flaps are up. Landing gear handle is down. Lights are in the green. Parking brake, don't need it. We got chocks. Engine start letters are cut off. And we'll leave the IRS on and so forth for now. Okay. And that completes the flight. Thank you very much.